Hi, I'm Chris Cassidy. Welcome to another episode of the City of Arlington's Forged by Honor. We're here today in our preview center for the Medal of Honor Museum, and this is where we showcase what the museum will look like. And today we have a special treat because we'll be talking with our curator, Greg Waters, about some of the artifacts that we have in our collection. Let's go have a chat with Greg. Greg, good morning.
Good morning, Chris.
So here we are, preview center. This is where we kind of showcase what we're gonna show. But you know what? With about 30,000 square feet of exhibit space, it's kind of tough to figure out what we're gonna put in there. So share a little bit your philosophy on how we pick artifacts and how we kind of go after them.
Exactly. So what we do basically is we narrow down the list of recipients to the featured recipients that we want to share those specific stories in the museum space. And then we become very familiar with their stories. So as you go through that research, often you'll come up with a rough list of artifacts that would be great to have in the museum. But one of the fun parts of my job is I have to then go out and figure out, are those things, do they still exist? And also, are they available? Can we get them? So that's the big crux of it. However, the best artifacts in my experience come directly from the living recipients and their families. That is the best. When you go and meet with them, you talk to them about how they experienced the Medal of Honor story, and then they tell you what artifacts are available. Some incredible things, and I have some great examples of that.
Going back earlier in our collection, this is one of our oldest medals, I think, right?
It
and
is.
This is a unique story.
Yeah.
Certainly no living family members that we can talk to here.
Exactly.
Tell us about this one.
So this is the oldest Medal of Honor in our collection. This was awarded to a soldier in the Union Army named Marcus Haskell. Marcus Haskell was in Antietam, the bloodiest day in American history. Over 22,000 Americans were killed, wounded, or missing in action during that battle. Marcus Haskell had been wounded earlier in the battle, but during one of the most intense parts of the fight, he saw one of his friends was wounded in the open battlefield. So he left cover, ran across open battlefield during the peak of the battle to save his friend.
Wow.
Pulls him off the battlefield and he comes home. With many of the Civil War stories, we don't have a ton of details about these individuals. For example, that is the only known photograph of Marcus Haskell. All we know about him, he's from Massachusetts. He serves throughout the Civil War. He's wounded 6 times in various battles and then goes home and lives a quiet life and dies in the early 1920s.
Well, speaking of the life before and after, that's one of the things we aim to do is to tell those stories, right? Like the entire life of a recipient, and we have one right here that fits that bill. Tell me about Hershey.
For sure. So one thing that's unique about our museum is we're not a military museum. We think of ourselves as a biography museum. We want to tell the full life stories of these individuals before they joined the military. Obviously, we will talk about their Medal of Honor experiences. And then once they came home, what did they do with the Medal of Honor? Hershey's story is incredible. He was in Korea in 1951. He was in a pretty intense battle in charge of several machine gun nests. It was very clear that it was time for them to get out of there. He stayed behind to make sure to give his guys that he was with enough time to get out. He was last seen fighting in hand-to-hand combat, and it was presumed that he was killed in action. It wasn't until several months later that his name finally surfaced on a prisoner of war list. He was a prisoner of war for 2.5 years in a Chinese prisoner of war camp. Now, the artifacts we have here, of course, his Medal of Honor here that the family shared with us, but these are some of my favorite artifacts in the collection. These are 3 letters written by Hershey's wife to Hershey while he was in Korea. Now, if you look at the dates, this is 3 days before his Medal of Honor action, this is 3 days after his Medal of Honor action, and this is about a week after that. And if you look closely, you'll see return to sender, and then down, verified missing in action. So that's one of the ways that the Miyamura family figured out that their person, Hershey, was missing in action and eventually a prisoner of war. Now, what's unique about these letters is that they were returned to his wife. Hershey eventually comes home, and for whatever reason, he never opened these letters. These are 3 unopened letters that his wife wrote to him during the war.
Oh my goodness, and we have them and they're still unopened.
Still unopened, we're not going to open them.
Unbelievable. And moving on to the Vietnam War, we've got a really interesting story here with the connection between Bud Day and John McCain. Why don't you tell us about that?
Certainly. So Bud Day is an aviator in Vietnam, an Air Force pilot. He gets shot down over North Vietnam, eventually gets captured, has a terrible experience, as you can imagine, in the Hanoi Hilton. He's in captivity for 5.5 years, eventually comes home and is awarded the Medal of Honor. And one interesting part of his story is that his cellmate was pretty notable. It was a guy named John McCain. longtime senator from Arizona and presidential candidate.
And you're from Arizona.
I am, so a connection to John McCain. The fascinating thing, so this is an example of a hidden artifact, one that we were unaware of when we were doing the research. It was only after going to visit the family that we were able to understand the full spectrum here. So basically, they pull out the Medal of Honor because they were going to donate it to us, and they also said, we also have the case, it's kind of beat up, do you want it? We said, absolutely. And they pull out the case, and it happens to have a John McCain presidential campaign sticker, because Bud Day was actively campaigning for John McCain, and that's his name tag from one of those events. And for some reason, he decided to slap it on his Medal of Honor case.
Wow. How did you get here, and what's it mean to you to be part of the Medal of Honor experience?
So for me, it's personal in that I come from a family with a long history of military service. My mom's side, that goes back to the Continental Army. My fifth great grandfather served in the Revolutionary War. Both my grandfathers served in World War II. Many uncles and cousins since then have served in the military. I didn't. So this, in some very small way, is my way of giving back, to be able to celebrate these stories and share them with our future museum visitors.
Oh man, well, we're glad to have you, and so is the City of Arlington, and we appreciate you guys tuning in for another episode of Forged by Honor.